Amanda Carson and Mark Rust seemed like two lives destined to never intertwine. Amanda, the devoted art teacher with a seemingly perfect life, and Mark, the quiet handyman with a shadowy past. But when their worlds collided in the secrecy of a forbidden affair, the consequences were darker than anyone in Mapleton could have imagined. What began as a spark of passion spiraled into obsession, manipulation, and ultimately, murder. Mapleton was a place that seemed untouched by time, a picturesque town nestled in the rolling hills where everyone greeted each other with a smile, and crime was practically unheard of. Its quaint streets were lined with historic homes, and its close-knit community thrived on trust and familiarity. For Amanda Carson, life in Mapleton was the definition of stability. She was a devoted wife to Tom, a hardworking man who managed the local hardware store, its kid, and a beloved art teacher at the local high school. Her days were spent painting, teaching, and taking care of their home, a quiet, predictable life that many would envy. But under the surface of Amanda's seemingly perfect life, a restlessness brewed. She loved her husband, but the spark that had once defined their relationship had dulled over the years. The same daily routines that brought her comfort now felt suffocating, and she often found herself longing for something more, though she couldn't quite define what more meant. It was during this period of unease that she met Mark Rust. Mark was a handyman, well known around Mapleton for his skill with tools and his magnetic personality. His rugged good looks and easygoing charm made him popular among the townsfolk, but his past was a mystery. Rumors circulated about why he had moved to Mapleton a few years ago, but no one ever pressed him for details. He was friendly enough, quick to lend a hand, and didn't cause trouble, so people left him alone. Amanda first encountered Mark when she hired him to fix a broken window in her backyard studio. It was a small space she used as her creative haven, a place where she could lose herself in her art. From the moment Mark arrived, Amanda felt something shift. Their initial conversations were light and professional, but there was an undeniable undercurrent of chemistry between them. Amanda brushed it off at first, attributing it to her own imagination. But Mark's lingering glances and his way of subtly complimenting her work made it clear that the attraction was mutual. What began as casual conversations about art and home improvement quickly evolved into something deeper. Amanda found herself looking forward to his visits more than she should have. Mark, with his rugged demeanor and air of mystery, offered an escape from the monotony of her life. He listened intently when she spoke, making her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. For Amanda, it was intoxicating. The affair began innocently enough, or at least that's what Amanda told herself. Stolen moments in the studio turned into shared coffee breaks and long conversations about life and dreams. With each meeting, their connection deepened, and the boundaries of propriety blurred. Amanda felt alive again, exhilarated by the secrecy and the attention. But she also felt a growing sense of guilt. She knew she was betraying Tom, the man who had always been loyal to her, but she couldn't seem to stop herself. What Amanda didn't realize was that Mark's feelings for her were far more intense than she imagined. To Mark, Amanda wasn't just an escape, she was an obsession. Every word she spoke, every smile she gave him, fueled his infatuation. He began to see her as the answer to everything missing in his own life, and the thought of losing her was unbearable. For Amanda, the affair was a temporary distraction, something she thought she could control. But for Mark, it was the start of something far more dangerous. As their secret relationship continued, Amanda found herself caught in a web of emotions she couldn't untangle. What had started as a thrilling escape was becoming something much darker, though she couldn't yet see it. And in the quiet shadows of Mapleton, the stage was set for a tragedy that would shatter the town's peace forever. The affair between Amanda and Mark quickly spiraled into something far more complex than Amanda had anticipated. While she viewed their relationship as an escape from her mundane routine, Mark saw it as the cornerstone of his existence. His infatuation with Amanda grew deeper with every secret meeting, every stolen touch, every whispered confession. To Amanda, Mark was exciting and unpredictable, but she had underestimated the intensity of his feelings and how far he was willing to go to keep her in his life. As weeks turned into months, Amanda began to feel the weight of what she was doing. The initial thrill of their encounters gave way to a gnawing guilt that she couldn't ignore. Tom, her husband, was still the same kind and loving man he had always been, but Amanda's growing distance didn't go unnoticed. He asked her if something was wrong, and though she assured him she was just overwhelmed with work, the lie felt heavier each time she repeated it. The trust they had shared for years now felt like a fragile facade, one that Amanda knew she was responsible for cracking. Mark, on the other hand, was becoming increasingly possessive. He started texting her more frequently, wanting to know where she was and who she was with. He began showing up at her studio unannounced, using excuses like fixing a leak or checking on previous repairs. Amanda tried to brush off his behavior as harmless, but a small voice in the back of her mind told her something was off. She noticed how his gaze lingered on her longer than it used to, how his compliments felt more intense, almost desperate. What Amanda dismissed as passion was, in reality, the beginnings of an obsession. The turning point came when Amanda decided she needed to end the affair. The guilt was becoming unbearable, and she realized she was risking everything: her marriage, her reputation, even her sense of self, for something that could never last. She convinced herself that Mark would understand, that he would see reason. After all, they had both known from the start that their relationship was built on borrowed time. But Mark didn't take the news the way Amanda had hoped. When she told him it was over, his expression shifted from disbelief to anger. He accused her of using him, of leading him on, and then trying to discard him like he didn't matter. His reaction frightened Amanda. She tried to calm him down, to explain that it wasn't about him, but Mark's words grew sharper, his tone more volatile. In that moment, Amanda saw a side of Mark she had never seen before, a side that chilled her to her core. After their confrontation, Amanda hoped Mark would respect her decision and move on, but instead, his behavior escalated. He started leaving anonymous notes on her car, cryptic messages that ranged from apologies to veiled threats. Small gifts began appearing at her doorstep: flowers, a book she had once mentioned, even a sketch of her face. Each gesture was a reminder that Mark wasn't letting go, and each one left Amanda feeling more trapped. She considered telling Tom the truth, but the idea of confessing her infidelity filled her with shame. Instead, she withdrew further, isolating herself from her husband and friends. She thought about going to the police, but convinced herself she was overreacting. Mark hadn't done anything illegal, at least not yet. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was brewing just beneath the surface. Unbeknownst to Amanda, Mark's obsession was consuming him. He spent hours watching her from a distance, learning her routines, imagining ways to win her back, or punish her for leaving him. To him, Amanda wasn't just a woman. She was his salvation, his reason for being. And if he couldn't have her, he wasn't sure he could let her go at all. The morning after Amanda's confrontation with Mark, the quiet routine of Mapleton was shattered. Her neighbor, Mrs. Ellison, was the first to notice that something was amiss. Amanda's car was still in the driveway long after she would typically leave for work, and her house was uncharacteristically silent. Mrs. Ellison, who prided herself on looking out for her neighbors, knocked on the door several times, but there was no response. Concerned, she called Tom, who was at work, and relayed her worries. Tom rushed home, a knot forming in his stomach. Amanda had been distant lately, but she was reliable. She wouldn't leave without saying something, or so he thought. When he arrived, he found the back door slightly ajar, and his concern deepened. Inside, the house was in disarray. Picture frames had been knocked over, and the smell of Amanda's favorite lavender candle lingered faintly in the air. But she was nowhere to be found. Tom immediately called the police, and within the hour, Mapleton's small police force arrived. Detective Laura Bennett, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving even the most puzzling cases, was assigned to the case. She began by examining the house, noting the signs of a struggle. Broken glass littered the floor of Amanda's studio, and a faint streak of what appeared to be blood led toward the back door. It wasn't much, but it was enough to suggest that something terrible had happened. As news of Amanda's disappearance spread, the town was gripped by fear and speculation. People who had once felt safe began locking their doors and looking over their shoulders. Whispers about Amanda's personal life began to circulate. Some hinted at trouble in her marriage, while others spoke of her rumored relationship with Mark. Mark's name quickly rose to the top of Detective Bennett's list of persons of interest. Mark was brought in for questioning, and though he denied any involvement in Amanda's disappearance, his behavior raised red flags. He appeared nervous, his answers were evasive, and he couldn't provide a clear alibi for the night she went missing. When asked about his relationship with Amanda, he admitted they had been friends, but claimed nothing more. However, his past told a different story. As Detective Bennett dug into Mark's history, a pattern of disturbing behavior emerged. He had a record in another state, with charges of harassment and restraining orders filed by multiple women. Though the charges had been dropped or dismissed, they painted a chilling picture of a man who couldn't let go when relationships ended. This discovery fueled Bennett's suspicion, but without hard evidence, she couldn't make an arrest. Meanwhile, a search team combed the woods and nearby areas for any sign of Amanda. Days turned into weeks, and hope began to fade. Tom, once stoic and composed, became a shadow of himself, pleading with anyone who would listen for information about his wife. Mrs. Ellison, racked with guilt for not acting sooner, offered to help distribute flyers and organize community searches. The entire town seemed to rally around the Carson family, but their collective efforts yielded no answers. One day, while reviewing evidence at the station, Detective Bennett noticed something peculiar in the photos taken at Amanda's studio. Among the scattered items was a small folded piece of paper, partially hidden under a shattered picture frame. When retrieved and examined, it revealed a hastily written message. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen." Though unsigned, the handwriting didn't match Amanda's, and Bennett suspected it was from Mark. With this potential piece of evidence, Bennett obtained a warrant to search Mark's home. What they found there only deepened the mystery. Hidden in his garage were several items linked to Amanda: photographs, a scarf she had been wearing in a recent picture, and a journal page ripped from one of her notebooks. But what disturbed the investigators most was a collection of personal items belonging to two other women who had gone missing years earlier in towns not far from Mapleton. The discovery changed the trajectory of the case. What had started as a missing person investigation now appeared to be part of something far more sinister. Amanda's disappearance was no longer an isolated event. It was the latest chapter in a chilling pattern that spanned years and claimed multiple victims. The search of Mark Rust's property opened a floodgate of revelations that shook Mapleton to its core. Hidden in his shed were items that told a horrifying story: photographs, jewelry, and personal belongings of women who had disappeared over the years. Two of these women, Jessica Fields and Emily Harper, had vanished under eerily similar circumstances to Amanda. Their cases, once cold and forgotten, were now thrust back into the spotlight. What had initially seemed like an isolated crime began to unravel as a much larger and more sinister pattern. Detective Laura Bennett worked tirelessly to piece together the connections. Forensics confirmed that several items in Mark's possession had traces of DNA from the missing women, linking him definitively to their disappearances. One particularly chilling discovery was a notebook in which Mark had meticulously documented details about the women's lives: where they worked, their routines, and even their favorite places. Amanda's name and schedule were among the entries, written in the same obsessive detail. While investigators continued combing through the evidence, media outlets descended on Mapleton. Sarah Lyman, a tenacious journalist from a major news network, began digging into Mark's past. Her reporting unearthed disturbing details about his life before he arrived in Mapleton. Mark had moved frequently, often leaving behind rumors and police reports of stalking and harassment. Though no charges had ever stuck, the pattern was undeniable. He targeted vulnerable women, ingratiated himself into their lives, and then became possessive and controlling. As the story gained national attention, pressure on the police mounted. The community, once united in its trust, now wrestled with fear and suspicion. Some questioned how Mark's dangerous tendencies had gone unnoticed for so long, while others whispered about Amanda's affair, blaming her for what had happened. The town that had prided itself on its peacefulness was now fractured, its residents grappling with the realization that evil had been hiding in plain sight. Mark, meanwhile, maintained his innocence, though the mounting evidence painted a damning picture. Under questioning, his calm facade began to crack. He denied any involvement in Amanda's disappearance, but couldn't explain why her belongings, and those of the other missing women, were found in his possession. Investigators pressed him about the notebook, the photos, and the items hidden in his shed, but Mark deflected their questions, claiming he was being framed. His behavior became increasingly erratic, oscillating between defiance and desperation. Despite the mounting case against Mark, the most crucial piece of evidence remained elusive: Amanda herself. Searches continued in the woods and surrounding areas, but weeks passed with no sign of her. The lack of closure weighed heavily on her family, particularly her husband, Tom, who struggled to reconcile his grief with the shocking revelations about Amanda's secret life. For Tom, the uncertainty was unbearable. Without Amanda's body, he couldn't fully mourn or begin to heal. The discovery of Mark's connection to Jessica Fields and Emily Harper brought additional families into the fold, each mourning their own tragic losses. The parallels between the cases were undeniable. Each woman had been independent, admired, and, in Mark's mind, unattainable. When they rejected him or tried to escape his grip, his obsession turned deadly. The scale of his crimes was staggering, and the case against him grew stronger by the day. As more details emerged, Detective Bennett began to focus on a critical lead: a secluded area in the woods that Mark had frequented. A search team was dispatched, and as they combed the dense forest, they found what they had feared but expected: a shallow grave. Inside, they uncovered human remains, later identified as one of Mark's earlier victims, Jessica Fields. The grim discovery bolstered the case against Mark and intensified efforts to find Amanda. The town of Mapleton, once a haven of safety and trust, was now a place of suspicion and mourning. What had started as a missing person investigation had revealed a serial predator hiding in their midst. And yet, despite the breakthroughs, one question remained unanswered: where was Amanda Carson? The weight of uncertainty hung over the town like a dark cloud, a reminder that not all stories end with resolution. The discovery of a shallow grave in the woods near Mapleton provided investigators with the breakthrough they desperately needed. The remains were confirmed to belong to Amanda Carson. Forensic analysis revealed signs of a violent struggle, suggesting she had fought for her life before succumbing to her injuries. The evidence painted a chilling picture of her final moments, leaving no doubt that she had fallen victim to Mark Rust, just like the other women tied to his sinister pattern of obsession and control. Mark was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder, abduction, and stalking. The courtroom became the stage for the town's reckoning, a place where the horrors hidden in their quiet community were laid bare for all to see. The trial captivated the nation, with media outlets broadcasting every shocking detail. Sarah Lyman's investigative reporting brought Mark's twisted history into the spotlight, revealing how he had evaded accountability for years by carefully exploiting the system and preying on vulnerable women. Prosecutors presented an overwhelming case. The notebook found in Mark's possession was a damning piece of evidence, documenting his fixation on Amanda and the other victims in disturbing detail. His detailed tracking of their schedules, their habits, and even their favorite outfits underscored his obsessive need for control. The gifts he had left Amanda and the cryptic notes she received in the weeks leading up to her disappearance were also introduced as evidence, painting a clear picture of his escalating behavior. Family members of the victims took the stand to share their grief, their voices cracking as they spoke about the loved ones Mark had taken from them. Tom Carson, hollow and visibly broken, described the agony of losing Amanda and the devastating betrayal of learning about her affair. While his testimony was restrained, his pain was palpable, resonating with everyone in the courtroom. It was a stark reminder that Mark's actions had not only ended lives, but shattered families and left emotional scars that would never fully heal. Mark's defense tried to argue that he had not intended to kill Amanda, claiming their relationship had been consensual and that her death was an accident. However, the prosecution dismantled this narrative with evidence of Mark's history of violence and his deliberate actions to cover up the crime. His calm demeanor in court unnerved those present, as he showed no remorse for his actions, even as the weight of the evidence against him mounted. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before delivering their verdict: guilty on all charges. Mark was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never again be able to harm another woman. For the families of Amanda, Jessica, and Emily, the verdict brought a sense of justice, though it could never truly heal their wounds. Mapleton was forever changed by the events surrounding Amanda's disappearance. The once idyllic town now carried the weight of tragedy, its residents grappling with the knowledge that someone capable of such evil had lived among them unnoticed. For Tom, moving on was impossible. He left Mapleton shortly after the trial, unable to face the constant reminders of what he had lost. The story of Mark Rust became a cautionary tale, a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked obsession and the importance of paying attention to the signs that often go unnoticed. It served as a grim reminder that even in the safest places, darkness can lurk, waiting for the opportunity to strike. Amanda Carson's life and the lives of the other victims became symbols of both the fragility of trust and the resilience of those left behind to carry on their memories.